Hello, welcome all. Welcome to this episode of our short webcast on design thinking for HR storytelling. As people are trickling in, I see some familiar names as well, and we'll give them some time to come in as well. But suffice to say, we will start on time. I want to begin by thanking all of you for, first of all, registering for this webcast in huge numbers, showing interest for this topic, as well as making time this Friday evening to come here and log in. I really appreciate your time joining in, and me and Mandar, my co host, will make sure that this is worth your time as well. So, before we begin, some basic announcements. We'll be doing this webinar for the next 15 minutes. We want to really keep it quick and short so that we are able to take more questions from you, from the audience. We've received some questions during the registration time, and there are a lot of questions. We had to sift through them, and we shortlisted a few questions that we think would be useful for all of you. Nonetheless, if any of you have any questions during this webinar at any given point in time, just kindly make sure to enter those in the chat box that you see below. So, without any further delay, let me begin this quick webcast. Um, there's this beautiful quote I like, and this is from Dr. Prabjot Singh. He's the director at Earth Institute, rather. And this is what he says, that we spend a lot of time designing a bridge, but not enough time thinking about the people who will be crossing it. And it so beautifully encapsulates our thinking process, right? All of us, or even most people out there, product developers or people in normal life, they create solutions, they products based on specifications and functions. But at the end of the day, nobody really gets into the mind of the user who's going to use that product or a service. And essentially, that's what we are trying to talk about today in this webcast. And this quote so beautifully sets the tone for it. Before I go any further, let me give you a quick introduction about who we are as an organization, as a company. So we are a boutique brand storytelling company. And we do our storytelling with an aim of enabling a culture of storytelling within an organization, right? So we take a very learning and consulting based approach, and we help organizations across different industry sectors create stories for a lot of variety of purposes. And I'll come to that later. Now, it's me. Hi, Rohan Poddar, your first speaker. And by professional training, I'm an engineer and an MBA. I did my MBA way back in 2007 in marketing. Post that, I was in various corporate sales and marketing roles in different IT organizations. And at some point in my career, I realized that my calling was more in creative pursuits. And that's when I left my corporate life. And in 2016, I started this company. It was a production company initially, and we gravitated towards being a brand storytelling agency over a period of last few years. And as a team, we're very passionate about finding and telling stories. Personally, I believe storytelling is both an art as well as a science. I'll let the second speaker, Mandar, introduce himself.
Hi, thank you, Rohan. Thank you so much. And again, I just extend a warm welcome to all our participants today. Similar to Rohan, I come from an engineering and a marketing MBA background. In fact, I and Rohan, like you mentioned, were colleagues in our MBA days. My corporate journey mostly saw me working with IMRB International. I was handling brand tracking research surveys for Unilever and a few banking organizations. Post that, I have mainly been working on training and consulting projects with various organizations and individuals. And I started this wonderful journey with Rohan around 6-7 years ago. And I primarily take care of the employer branding projects. And as an individual, I think in the phase that organizations are today, we as an company want to build a culture of storytelling, whether it is for the end use of employer branding or product branding, or whether it's for corporate branding. We believe stories can distinctly connect to a emotion that the stakeholders have in their mind, and that is probably a way to go ahead for a lot of internal communication that happens within organizations. Now, why we chose design thinking as a methodology when we use storytelling for HR teams. So Rohan will obviously brief you on what kind of workshops we have in this domain. Uh, but to just give you a quick idea, I'm sure you all know what design thinking is and what are the fundamentals of this approach. But how do we as an organization apply it to our HR interaction and the different functional teams within HR, whether it is LNOD, whether it is talent acquisition, talent management, employee experience teams. Now, one of the critical approaches that HR teams take is based on the fact that they are very people centric, right? You are the face of your organization. And design thinking as an approach firstly talks about empathizing with your end user. So, in this case, your end user, who's your workforce, how can HR teams make their entire processes driven by a people centric approach? That is where the marriage of storytelling and design thinking happens. To give you a small example, uh, have you ever thought about involving your employees in crafting a HR initiative or a policy, which can give them a sense of ownership? Have you thought about integrating a seamless design experience by understanding their perspective? Because they are the end user at the end of the day. So these are approaches which design thinking will help us integrate into the HR communication that happens.
Uh, Now you must be wondering what design and how design thinking melds into HR storytelling. So, firstly, HR teams, and a lot of participants today are from HR teams. There are a lot of people who are also from LNOD. HR teams primarily are into the business of people. They interact with people on a day-to-day basis, and people, like you may know, are irrational. They're emotional creatures, unlike material resources. So you are handling a set of resources which are very irrational, emotional, and they need to be looked at from a different lens. There's no single formula for talking to people, right? Secondly, discovering stories is very different from a regular business communication, which is very unilateral, right? It's written from the perspective of the company. But discovering stories more, it's all about your audience. What is it? What message can really connect and be relatable to them? And that's where the whole art and science of design thing comes into process. Thirdly, there's and some of you might have this impression that storytelling is just a spark of creativity. Well, that may be so, but there's also a method to madness to it. There you need to have a certain method to come up with stories. So essentially, these are the three basic reasons why we very strongly believe that design thinking is required in HR storytelling. Now, let me quickly introduce to you those 5 phases that design thinking is about. Now, I'm sure again that most of you might have heard about this in your careers, in your work life. But as I said, the purpose of today's discussion is in the context of storytelling. How does this apply to storytelling? So, first is empathize. Now, what this means is that whom do you empathize with? So you need to know who's your target audience. Just like if you're a product developer, you need to know who your end user is. If you're telling a story, you need to know who your target audience is. And secondly, it's very important to look at their situation in life from their own eyes. And that's essentially what empathy is about. So, for example, if you're rolling out a learning initiative or it's about appraisals or about career development, what is it that people have? How do people feel about these things? What are their feelings, their emotions? If we can identify that, then that really helps us empathize with people, putting ourselves in their shoes. So, very quick example: imagine that you're rolling out the cultural values of your organization across the whole gamut of employees. Now, the first step if you're following a design thinking approach would empathize with your employees. That means you need to know what do they feel about your cultural values. What challenge do they feel in imbibing these cultural values in their day-to-day work ethic? What are the gaps? What do they genuinely feel about it? Do they feel that these values are just paperwork, or they really mean something? So this is something where when you get into their shoes and you apply yourselves to them and how they look at this whole issue, that's when you start empathizing with them.
Now, once you start empathizing with, different sets of employees, we come to the next step, which is discovering. Now, discovering is more about understanding more of the psychographic persona of these employees. What kind of, let's say, cadre they belong to, what management cadre, what is their age group, how many years they have spent in your organization. Now, once you start discovering all these parameters in the second step of this process, you can probably uncover critical areas, what kind of potential story can emerge when you look at all of these parameters of your workforce and your employees. You can look at who are the key stakeholders for each of the areas, because I'm sure when you roll out a culture initiative like Rohan mentioned, imbibing these behaviors into different sets of people. Some might be on the ground as sales staff, some are in your corporate office, some might be in a manufacturing facility that you have. Now, imbibing these behaviors that the values stand for each of these employee profiles needs you to discover certain critical parameters in a different approach. So, for example, let's take an example of open communication. So, what we discovered in a leadership storytelling session was that open communication was one of the biggest challenges that the leaders were facing. And then through the workshop, we helped them identify these critical parameters for different employee personas.
Third step in this whole design thinking process is ideate. Now that you've empathized with your audience, you've discovered certain very critical areas that you think stories can be embedded. Now it's the right brain that comes into play. So that's where we start ideating. So we do this through what we call a how might we statement. Now, how might we essentially is this. So how might we tell a story to achieve a certain outcome? You have to define what an outcome is so that our target audience, whosoever the target audience is, are able to achieve the purpose. So when you now you've known the problem, now you know the problem, right? When you articulate it as such, what you're doing is you're forcing yourself to precisely define the problem. And this then leads to a broad narrative. So let me give an example. So this is a how might we statement that we had crafted for one of our clients. And it says that how might we tell a story to increase the learning content consumption so that line managers are able to learn team management skills. Now, we brought down the whole problem to this one single statement. Now, this could lead to a rush of ideas, right? So you might think, well, let's take an example of a line manager who's facing a lot of attrition in his team, and he is not able to, plug the leak. Now, that time he realizes that if he were more skillful about handling his employees, and this especially happens in appraisal cycle, if he's able to have negotiation skills, interpersonal skills, probably he would be able to better stop that leakage of employees, the attrition of employees. And that's when he realizes that he needs an upgrade of skills. He needs to be a better version of himself. Right now, this is the idea that came about from this "how might we" statement. So, as you can see, when you're articulating things very clearly, ideas start running in your mind as to how could you create a story.
Great. Now, the next step in this entire process of a story is crafting a story. Do you remember going to a theater to watch a movie? Whatever genre of movies you like, whether it's a regional, Hindi, or probably a Hollywood movie, you would always find these five C's in a movie to make it effective. Now, if any of these are missing, you will not remember the story. How would you feel coming out of a theater without shedding a tear or without having a great laugh? That's how you connect with a story with your emotions. So these are the five critical C's which make an impact and differentiate an ordinary story from a great story. Also, we need to understand as HR teams what are the most suitable touch points that your employees can experience this story. To give you a quick example, when we were working with a client, uh, this company was launching a product line and an integrated marketing campaign was to be designed, right? Now, some of their managers were not equipped, they were not skilled enough to take up this product launch, and how the LNOD team enabled them using certain online content And that journey of a marketing manager was shared with the entire workforce in different regional offices and different cities. That is the context where that particular marketing manager and many more like him start identifying with the story because they see themselves in the place of that person.
Right. So now the last part, which is narrate, which essentially in a design thinking process is equivalent to iteration, right? Now, what you do essentially in this is that you narrate the story that you have created to a sample set of target audience to get their qualitative feedback. So, and I'll give an example of this, right? Now, if that narrative doesn't seem to ring bell with them, you need to go back to the drawing board and revise it. That's essentially what design thinking process is about. It's not about forcing your opinions on people, but being very open to what their view is. So, for example, you craft a narrative, and this narrative is basically created so that after the story is exposed to your candidates, you want to see that they're encouraged to apply for a specific job opening in your software development department, right? So when you create such a narrative, ideally it would be best to test it out with certain new joinees in software development department, because since they just recently joined the organization, they would be a good tasting sample group to try out this narrative. So essentially that's what narrate means when it comes to design thinking. Now, in these 5 phases were the phases where you have now gone through this whole thinking, empathized, pinpointed the exact problem, narrated, created narrative, story narrative from that, and tested it with a sample group of target audience. Of course, what next comes is how do you create effectiveness parameters for your story? So, call to action. Every story, as you must have seen in the 5 C's, every story has a call to action. Are people taking that call to action? So, if certain percentage of people are taking your call to action, that could be signing up employee survey. It could be attending a learning session, or it could be being part of a performance appraisal, whatever that is. Are they taking it? Engagement metrics are typically digital, focused on digital and social media specific, and qualitative feedback that I touched upon in the rate part. I would like to then talk about our storytelling dive camp. All these 5 phases that you saw in design thinking is what we use to unearth stories with your team. So this particular dive camp is designed for your HR teams to come and sit in a room and discuss ideas, create ideas about stories that are already lying within your organization, but they need to be brought out and told very effectively. So that's essentially what we do. Suffice to say, design thinking is also our approach when we consulting for storytelling for our clients. The main advantage is that we want to make your teams better storytellers so that they are themselves able to spot. It's like you help somebody to fish and they're able to fish on their own, right? Secondly, you want to humanize your internal external communication as a result of that. And as I said, our objective is to create a culture of storytelling. A culture of storytelling can only happen if everybody knows how to create a story or tell a story, right? And they're able to imbibe it in their day-to-day work ethic. And essentially, that's where we are focused at. And of course, when you create stories, you have these ideas, you put on the table, you are able to create business case for your CXO teams to go and say, hey, look, these are the stories that we can create. So that was quickly about our storytelling session. We have some questions, as I said, we received from the audience who registered for this webcast, and we had quite a few of them, and we want to keep it tight, as I said. So we'll take those few questions very quickly. I'll ask Martin to quickly share a question that is received.
Right, thanks, Rohan. So I guess we had about 22 or 23 questions today. I think we'll have time to take up about 5 or 6, and rest assured, we will get on touch with your teams, or either you directly on your email IDs to answer your questions if you are not able to take them up. We have also tried to combine a lot of questions so that we are able to answer them effectively. So the first question was shared by Sudipta Mazumdar, and the question was, how can L&D teams justify their role in this entire storytelling context? So again, this is a very broad topic for discussion, but 2 key points which I would like to share with you. Firstly, L&D teams are critical in doing stakeholder buy-in, right? So whichever stakeholders across functional teams and departments are going to be involved in, let's say, a certain change management initiative to align with your goals, your organizational growth strategy. L&D teams can justify their role completely when they use storytelling to align all these stakeholders. Secondly, what happens is when you start illustrating your initiatives and the success, the experiences, the challenges that your own stakeholders had with this change management initiatives, you also help a lot of collaboration build in your teams. So again, Sudipta, we hope you were able to answer a question. We can always get in touch with you on email.
Right. The second question is from Benny D. Ezekiel from Great Hotels. And what he asks is, what initiatives should an organization take at the moment with regard to developing their employees to align with tomorrow's AI intervention? And if queues revolve around hospitality sector. Well, amazing question by Benny. Thank you, Benny, for asking that. Now, again, let's go back to basics. Design thinking starts with empathizing. So, if AI is going to be intervening in your sector, and there are a lot of ways, I'm sure that will create a lot of apprehension amongst your employees. It will create a lot of tension, fear, what the future is going to be like. Are they going to get kicked out of the job? Are their jobs going to become redundant? the the best place to start off would be empathizing and trying to understand what their concerns are, what are their views as well about AI, because some of them might misinform, some of them might have certain notions. All of that needs to be taken into consideration before you are able to shortlist three or four critical areas where AI will affect your employees. That could be, and I'm not, again, I'm not from hospitality sector, so I can't really think of something on the spur. But suffice to say that, if you identify three areas where AI will really affect, it could be maybe customer management, or it could be somebody else. Then your staff in customer management, for example, you could allay their fears by creating stories that address those emotions of anxiety, those apprehensions that they have. So I think that would be a good place to start off with, as far as AI intervention is concerned. And you follow the same process. We have used this design thinking for a variety of use cases, and it simply works every single time. That's the beauty of design thinking. If I have, I hope I have able to answer. If I have not able to answer, Benny, feel free to get in touch with us, post this webcast, and we will have a conversation.
Thanks, Rohit. So the next question was from Mr. Murli Sahu, who's heading HR for his organization, and he had asked us, how does EVP enhance employee engagement? So again, Murli, this is quite an extensive topic, but two quick pointers from our end. One thing that a EVP well-defined can do is set clear expectations, right? An organization is as much important in the EVP as are the employees. So a clear set of expectations of what the organization is doing for its employees, and also transparently what is the employee expected to do for his own growth in the organization. So this two-way communication will create a stronger bond. Secondly, what we think is a trust deficit quite often is observed in a lot of organizations. So when an EVP is designed and communicated, how can this trust issue be taken care of using storytelling? So these are two areas where we think EVP can enhance employee engagement deeply.
Right. I'll take the next question. It's from Shantanu Ray. He's the head of HR at Anwar Group. And he asks, do you agree that having enough emotional intelligence may always help in producing humane solutions to prospective problems? How that works actually? Well, this is a very deep question, but I'll try to answer it as quickly as I can. So, emotional intelligence is what? It's the ability to correctly label the emotion that you're currently feeling and to know the source of that emotion. If you're able to do this, then you're in a very good position to manage that emotion. Now, once if you're able to do this with yourself, you are emotionally intelligent. Same applies with a group of people. If in the empathize space you're able to identify the emotions of your target audience, know what exactly those emotions are, where are they coming from, then that it makes you very emotionally intelligent while creating story, right? And that's essentially how you are able to create humane problems, right? For a very quick example, like there was this done by a design thinking firm where they wanted to redesign the emergency room of an hospital. And so one of their designers, he acted as if he's a patient in the outpatient department, and they took him through a stretcher. And while on the stretcher, he through a patient's eyes, he saw how the hospital looks like. It's a very gloomy place. People are always in a rush, and having me empathize with the patient, he was able to come up with solutions. And one of the solutions was actually having a better visual imagery on the ceiling, right? Because that's how patient goes through. So that's how essentially how we come up with solutions. Very quickly, since we are running out of time, that's it. We have time for that. I would like to take a quick check on any questions. Yeah, there's question from Lena. She said, yes, Lena, you would get a well, transcript we won't be able to give you, but we'll share with you the recording of this workshop. That definitely will do with you, as well as we'll share the PowerPoint presentation with you uh, of this webinar.
Rohan, I think we have time for one more question. There was a very interesting question from Sabita from Zepto.
Yeah,
She is a
sure.
part
Go
of
ahead,
the
Nanda.
employee experience team. And what she asked us was, uh, there are a lot of unconscious biases that exist between cross-functional teams. And how can we use storytelling as an effective tool to handle these unconscious biases? So Sabita, thanks for this great question. A couple of things that we would like to share with you. You can organize a group storytelling session, where employees share their personal experiences and growth journeys within your organization. This helps them create a safe space for an open dialogue. Secondly, once this group storytelling sessions become a norm, it helps you to challenge the typical stereotypes that a lot of people have. So let's say, someone from the logistics department might have a very stereotypical image of someone who's from the digital marketing team. Now, this group storytelling session will, to a large extent, help you to address that and also create empathy between these cross-functional teams. I hope I was able to give you a rough context of that, and we can definitely connect on email further on this.
So thank you guys for making time this Friday evening and being a part of this webcast. We'll be sharing, as I mentioned, both the recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation. At any given point in time, you want to talk to us, have a conversation. This is where you reach us at. And thank you once again. Have a good Friday evening and a great weekend. Thank you.